Hi, Theresa. Thank you very much for being here today with Pro-Life Magazine. I really appreciate you taking the time for us.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
So let's jump right into questions. The first one I had was, what was your impetus for creating Rachel's Vineyard, and how did you come up with that very unique name?
I had so many experiences in graduate school for psychology where abortion was something that no one was willing to talk about. And I had a number of experiences in different supervised settings where I was instructed not to talk about abortion. And so if someone tells you you're not supposed to do something, it makes me feel a little bit passionate about it for some reason. So I started one of the first therapeutic support groups. And I saw very quickly that all my training in psychology really didn't touch this wound. It was so deep. It was so big. It had a lot of spiritual as well as psychological components, a lot of grief and a lot of guilt. So I saw that it needed a process of reconciliation, and then I turned to the gifts in my faith to integrate them into a treatment model that was Rachel's Vineyard. So the name Rachel comes from the book of Jeremiah about Rachel mourns her children and refuses to be consoled because her children are no more. Thus says the Lord, cease your cries of mourning and weeping. There's hope for your future. So that was about the Lord's desire to comfort this grief of lost children. And then the name Vineyard actually came because when I made this model and I went to present it at a conference for therapists, no one was interested at all in something that integrated spiritual with something psychological. They wanted to keep it very clinical. And there was a bit of resistance against the whole idea. And so I thought, well, why write a book if no one wants to use it? So I went to the Bible, and I'd only done this once before. You know how a lot of people go to the Bible and they say, show me how to, show me what to do, Lord, and then...
I think it was St. Augustine did that.
Well, I only use this for very specific occasions. The only time I had ever done this before was when I got married, and I was a little bit nervous to marry. I like my freedom, and I went to the Bible and it said it's better to marry than to burn. So I got married. But then...
So you listened.
I'm just saying that I only used this when it was really important. And I thought this was important. So I open up the Bible. I go right to John 15. I am the vine, you are the branches. Unless you remain united to me, you will bear no fruit. So to me, that was my answer, to say, without shame, without fear, to put the Lord between, in the middle of every exercise that we do on Rachel's Vineyard. And that's where the vineyard comes from.
So beautiful. Thank you. You touched a second ago a little on you in your practice early on. You felt that there was some very deep pain, and I know there are many symptoms to post-abortion trauma. Can you touch on some that you see that are really prevalent? What are some of the ones that really stand out to you?
Well, I would say that because abortion is a secret, women make them at a time of panic and crisis. It's not something they want people to know about, so it's surrounded by a lot of shame and a lot of grief. And most women feel forced into an abortion because the circumstances aren't right. They don't want to be blamed. The man plays a very central role in a woman's decision to abort. Just his reaction that she's going to be very sensitive to. So there's a lot of things that go into that decision-making process, but it's one made in a lot of isolation. And that it's not being able to process what happened, to go back and pretend that nothing just happened to you when you had a very life-changing event. It involves the death and destruction of one's child, and that's going to impact us on a maternal level. So I really wanted to study this grief in graduate school, and I actually was at the University of Pennsylvania getting supervision, and my supervisor said to me she couldn't supervise me anymore because supervising me would contribute to pro-life ideology, and she had an ethical problem with that. So she couldn't refer me to any of her colleagues because they all felt the same way, and I felt so bad for any woman that was grieving the loss of her child, going to mental health care, which so many women, and I'll elaborate on these symptoms in a second, you have this hurt. You might develop an eating disorder as a result of it because it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. And all the addictions where you're trying to numb and constrict your pain. So using alcohol, drugs, these all become ways that people cope, which creates more problems. There's patterns of multiple abortion, multiple, atonement pregnancies. We call them replacement pregnancies, where they want to finish what they started. They've lost something, they want to make up for it. But so many of the situational things are the same. They're not in a good relationship. There's a lot of instability. So people can either do two things when they've had an abortion. They can ignore it and run from the pain with all the drug and alcohol. And you can also run successfully, meaning that you go on to be a workaholic and go on and earn a lot of degrees, and you can, use your intellect to distance yourself from the reality. I suppose the beliefs and the intellectual possession, I call it, that makes it incapable to even look at what's been lost here, because they use ideology to hide under, like my supervisor. And then there's other people, anyone with a history of, say, sexual abuse, which is, the statistics are really not in women's favor. There's a lot of abuse. So they endure, or family, any previous mental health issues, any hurt in the family where they have divorce maybe and they're already experiencing different levels of trauma. Then you have an abortion experience. Sometimes for people it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. These are the folks that have depression and anxiety immediately. These are the folks who really suffer acutely because they don't have the resources, inner resources, or even support or intellect sometimes to be able to cope with it in that way that they can bury themselves in work. And so these are the ones whose lives spiral out of control very quickly. And it's really tragic. The suicide rate after abortion is really high. And I did a world literature review, and the best available data is coming from countries where you have socialized medicine, and you can see suicide rates of 600, 800% following abortion. And it's a real serious trauma that can end in tragedy like that, not to mention just people completely going off the track of what God had planned for their lives and what they wanted for their lives. So goals are derailed. A lot of people drop out of school because they can't concentrate. They have hyperarousal. That's where they're always on the alert for threats of danger. They feel panicky. And then a lot of people make decisions that are rooted in their unhealed trauma, like not ever having children because they don't feel worthy to be a mom. So like consequences and decisions that can go on for a lifetime, really.
It's interesting, you were talking about ideology, and it sounds like what you were trying to do was just help people in need, right? And forget about the pro-life, pro-choice. It's just these women are in pain. But I'm curious, this sounds like it's been going on for a long time. Let's call the people that support that ideology of many words for pro-abortion, pro-choice. Why is that not, in your experience, why is that not talked about? Why is it downplayed sometimes, or in many cases just outright denied? What's behind that?
It's people's personal experiences with abortion, or they're encouraging someone to have one. They don't want to be responsible. Even if you're a counselor who told someone this is the best thing, and then their life falls apart, the last thing someone trying to help another wants to hear is that what you told me to do completely ruined my life and, resulted in a million problems. People don't want to hear that. A lot of the early feminists who laid the groundwork for abortion rights are women who were traumatized by their abortions. And they thought that by making it legal, Gloria Steinman, Kate Michelman, Patricia Ireland, they all thought that by making it legal that they would take away the stigma and the trauma. But it didn't. Even in the most pristine hospital with anesthesia, with, whatever, a woman has still endured the unspeakable loss of her child in a very destructive and violent way. So there's a trauma attached to that. And, without the support, when one's isolated, when you have to keep it a secret, when people don't even want to hear about it, because of their own reasons, because of their own support. But I think it's always a personal attachment to abortion because you helped someone get one or you haven't dealt with your own.
Now, you know well that I have been to a Rachel's retreat recently. One of the reasons we're sitting here talking right now. And it was a very powerful experience. And, you know, sometime after when I looked back at that, I was just very intrigued by the process. It was a very unique process. And I'm wondering, could you talk a bit about how you came up with that process and why do you think it's been so effective with helping both men and women heal from their abortion experience?
Yeah, I'm so happy the retreat was helpful for you and so many other people, and it truly is a unique process, and it probably comes out of my unique background because before I went into psychology, I had a master's in theater. Okay. And so Rachel's Vineyard
now there's
is
a connection being made already.
Rachel's Vineyard is sort of like a play. Only the main actor in the play is the Lord Jesus, who comes and wants to heal us. So we're basically acting out scriptures where Jesus touched and healed very broken people. So there's lights and there's music and there's soft, quiet, peaceful meditations. And over the years, as I got deeper and deeper into psychology and was training and teaching many classes as I do now, I learned a ton about brain science. And the latest brain science is saying that victims of trauma do not respond to talk therapy. That sometimes talking about it makes it worse for them. And the best data is showing that a sensory-based treatment is actually the ideal way to deal with trauma victims, where you stimulate the right brain. Now, this is all science, which I don't need to go into for the show, but I can tell you that meditation and prayer stimulates the frontal cortex that helps people integrate their cognitive and their emotional experience. Because what happens with trauma is that people are in the super alarm, reacting all the time, or defense, or screaming at pro-lifers because they're being triggered, you know, their memories, and so they're going to attack the messenger because they can't process the message. It's too painful. It's opening up, it's like an open sesame to all their unresolved grief and feelings that they've run from or avoided. The other side of that would be a complete numb and detached response. This doesn't hurt anybody. I don't feel anything. I was fine after my abortion. And you know, a lot of people can go through life like that till some other event, perhaps the birth of a wanted child, and then everything splits open for them. They can have postpartum depression and psychosis because the child they're holding is a trigger. Women who struggle with infertility might have been fine until they couldn't have a baby, and then they're going to remember the children they lost. When I teach in hospitals, I'm always surprised to hear the people who work in hospice come to me and say, I have a whole floor of people who are struggling with post-abortion trauma who cannot go into death peacefully. And we actually have teams from Rachel's Vineyard who go bedside to hospitals, to cancer patients, people who are terminal, sometimes old people, because this is something that they might be able to run from for the whole life, but then they fear these spiritual issues. They fear judgment by God, and, you know, they have all this anxiety, and it's not a pleasant time at all. So we do what we can to comfort and compassionately care for, and to show people that their children are actually waiting for them in heaven, and that nothing, as the Holy Father said, is definitely lost, that your children are living in the Lord.
And I had that at the retreat. That was a very powerful experience for me because, to be honest, going to the retreat, I wasn't quite sure why I was going, because I did feel that I had been forgiven, but I was missing something, and the retreat taught me what that was. You touched on it some. I'm wondering if there's something else to this. I noticed at the retreat, where the fellow people with me, there was no one there who had a, what I would call, recent abortion experience. In other words, these were 20 plus years, 30, I think in one case, maybe 40 plus years. And it's interesting to me in my own case, and looking around, it's like, why do you think it takes so long sometimes for someone to, you mentioned sometimes it's an event that happens, but I didn't have a specific event. But I'm wondering if there's why does it take so long for someone to seek out healing?
I think most people finish their experience with abortion, if they don't go on to repeat it many times, they just never want to think about it again. They're going to move on. They're going to make their life work. They're going to, maybe get married, have a family, and then it's like that might be something grating underneath, but you're not going to think about it because what would your wife think? What would your husband think? There's always that fear of judgment, and I think that creates a great paralysis. I would say that this was always my experience, like your retreat, that people would wait 20, 30, 40, and we saw this post-traumatic stress disorder where it was a delayed reaction that opened up during some of the life events I described to you. And but now, with so much more people healed, the healing releases people from shame. And then we have them out giving their stories, their testimony, there's videos. Like 20, 30 years ago, there was nothing you could find on the internet. You wanted a support group, there wasn't a Bible study, there wasn't websites. Like now,
not in the yellow pages, right?
Yeah, now there's so much more. So we've really come a long way in educating people. And the key to me is healing, because then you can free those voices to speak the truth that is otherwise hushed. I remember going to a high school and asking how many people knew someone who had an abortion. The whole room raised their hand, and I said, how many of you have ever heard someone tell their story of what that was like for them? Nobody raised their hand. So these stories are critical, the healing's critical, but I would say that now there's retreats that have 10 teenagers, People are coming younger and younger. We have a lot of abortion providers coming, nurses, whose job it is to put back the pieces together to make sure it's not an incomplete abortion. And they have extreme trauma, and they come and they cry and they say, we didn't know where else to go. And siblings of aborted people are coming on, of aborted children are coming on Rachel's Vineyard. So this is just like, it doesn't just affect the woman or even the man, and for too long we saw it as a woman's issue, and it's not. It takes two to make a baby.
Yes, that's right. So if someone that's watching this, and obviously with the example you just gave of the high school class, there are many people that know someone that had an abortion, but it can be a sensitive topic, discussing that with someone. But if they see in their close friend, for example, or a family member, some of these symptoms that you're talking about, and they might think this abortion experience had something to do with it, what is the right way to approach them to kind of talk about that issue, and then possibly recommend Rachel's Vineyard retreat as a pathway to help them?
Well, you want to understand that the defensiveness is all about their hurt. So you don't tread harshly on someone's broken heart. You go in with a lot of compassion, and you go in with the desire to listen and to be there for them. Their biggest fear is being judged. And so, while we understand that abortion is the destruction of a child, it's a very personal matter for someone and a painful matter. So with gentle compassion, and I like to suggest to people that they assure the person that they're there for them, that they know this has been a rough road, that they deserve healing, that they're a good person, that you can give Rachel's Vineyard as a gift sometimes. Sometimes people can offer like a Christmas present, a birthday present, because I know you've suffered from this, and I know it's hard for you to talk about. And you know that if you're close to the person, you know that, like you're saying, this is a good question because everybody struggles it. We all love someone who suffered, and yet you can feel so powerless when you know there's something that could help them. But they need to know that they're worthy of that, and that you would move the sun, the moon, and the stars to get them there. So if it's a gift, if they're frightened to go alone and you offer to go as a support person, we allow that on our retreats. Okay. So I also think another thing is education. Like, people might not, if you see they're sensitive, give them the thing that they can look at, a brochure or a book, Forbidden Grief, where they can learn about their problem in the privacy of their own room. Because a lot of people are afraid of just breaking down in front of you. So they're going to push you away before those feelings surface. So to give them something or to mail them something that they can open in the privacy. I thought of you when I saw this. You deserve to heal. I love you so much. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you get there. You deserve it. Those kind of messages.
So they might need to step away, if you will, from that personal interaction with you where there's a lot of emotions and be with themselves and read it and think about it. Maybe it's easier for them to come to a decision that way.
Well, once you encounter someone's resistance or their outright anger, anger is so much easier and more powerful than grief. You have to see anger as the cover over the grief. So the mistake that I think people make is to step back and say, well, I'm never going to say anything again. She's so sensitive. He's so sensitive. Like, we can never talk about this. And then they go into a fear mode.
So they misread the signal.
They do, and they fear, and they step back, and then they get mad because she should just do something, and
I was just trying to help, right?
And look at all the lives you're screwing up, and instead of that gentle, just consistent presence, because some people put that brochure under their mattress, and we hear these stories at our retreats for 4 or 5 years. So when the person's ready, and what makes a person ready is when they feel that they're secure and they're in a stable enough situation to tolerate the pain. And this is why sometimes it takes years. You want to know that your family's going to be there for you. Maybe you have to have other kinds of testing where you test them through things, because no one wants to risk ruining something that's going well, or having people look at them in a different way when you work so hard to become something else. And so you have to have enough confidence in yourself, and that's why some people wait till their 40s and 50s.
I tell you, it's at my experience at the Rachel's Vineyard retreat, there were a number of counselors who were helping with the process. Absolutely wonderful, compassionate people. And I would think a lot of people out there might be interested in some way becoming involved in Rachel's Vineyard as their vocation, as a ministry, helping either to guide a process, run a retreat, or be a counselor, assistant, something like that. So for people that are listening to this and it's kind of on their heart to do something like that, what can they do? How do they find out about doing this?
We actually make it pretty easy for you.
Okay.
Because Rachel's Vineyard, I think it's in 63 countries now,
okay,
in 29 languages. We have 100,000 volunteers involved with this program.
Wow, okay.
And so we work by mentoring people, and we have a leadership conference every year. Our next one is next summer in July. And then we train them, we give them the background, we give facilitation skills. And it's not rocket science. You follow the manual. It's what we call an empirically validated treatment, meaning that you can't really screw it up if you follow the way it's designed.
Just do what it says, right?
We just want people with real compassionate hearts who are going to convey this type of love, to embody the love and the life of Jesus Christ as they minister in His name. And we work with teams of counselors, interested lay people, those who have suffered the loss of a child and have recovered, because we work as a body of Christ and we need all the gifts. So if someone out there is listening, the first requirement is that you go on a retreat as a participant. We don't want anyone coming to observe. Everybody has something to grieve. And we've found that people who don't deal with their own things, then they are going to inhibit the grief of other people. They're going to find it frightening. So we want the Lord to heal you before you try to help anyone else.
Even if that's not abortion, it could be something else.
It could be anything. It could be abuse. It could be, any kind of loss or grief, the loss of a loved one, just so that when someone else cries, you're not going to get upset, because when someone cries, it's contagious.
Sure.
And if you're threatened by your own issues, whatever they are, you're going to stop that consciously or unconsciously. So we want people to really open their lives and their histories to the Lord. They're also going to realize how hard it is to do that. And then they would never tread with insensitivity in these exercises. We want everyone to feel safe. And we don't have a model where, I'm going to fix you. We journey through the paschal mystery of our own lives, the suffering, the death of the children, the death of the self sometimes that happens in traumatic and we move with Christ into an experience of resurrection. So if you don't know what that feels like in your own life, you're a real lousy facilitator for someone else. So, and people come who, Rachel's Vineyard is so extraordinary in that people come, even professionals come thinking they've seen everything, they know how to handle everything, and the first night they sit with their mouth open. And people who think that Lord healed them, or that they did healing many years ago and they've been helping all sorts of people, and we say, we don't care what you've done, you have to go through as a participant. Because the Lord always wants to give us more. Yes. We can't imagine how full and rich and deep He wants our lives to reflect Him. And we kind of come to this place, I think, as humans, where we settle. It's like, okay, I did a little healing and I feel better. It doesn't have the hold over me as before, but they have no clue that the Lord wants to take them miles ahead into a deeper peace, a deeper relationship, a deeper sense of, love. And that we cut ourselves off when we don't open ourselves to those kind of experiences. And so it's like you come receive before you try to give. And even if you think you received it all, the funnest part is when people come back and they said, I had no idea. There's all the stuff that the Lord wanted to work on. But that's how He is with us. And sometimes He takes our own interest in other people to open up a door that's really meant for ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, Rachel's Vineyard's been around a while, and you've done a lot of things. Like you said, I had no idea you had that many volunteers. That's incredible. But there may be some people listening to this that they probably heard of Rachel's Vineyard, but they don't know all the details. So where can they go to learn more about what you do? And there are probably some people out here, too, that might be interested in supporting the mission, because you're a nonprofit organization, yes. Correct? So you need support. Where do they go to do that? You would go to www.RachelsVineyard.org. That's our website. A listing of all the retreats would be there, questions and answers, other people's experiences of the retreat. But it's really a gift to give yourself. So rather than all the fear we were talking about, it's like a Christmas present waiting. Who wouldn't go down and open a Christmas present that's just waiting for you, because it's not going to re-traumatize you? A lot of people are afraid, if I open this up, I'm not going to function anymore, and it's just not the way it works. People leave dancing and laughing, and I can attest to that. It's that way everywhere, and they're going to move forward in their journey no matter what, and it's just a gift. It's a gift for yourself. So I'll encourage people to learn more about it. Don't be afraid. There's people who understand, who've been there, and you're not alone, and that's half the battle. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for what you did. As you know, we talked about the impact that had on my life, and for obviously thousands and thousands of people. It's a grace of God. Definitely appreciate you doing that, for what you've done to date, and of course, Rachel's Vineyard going forward. And appreciate you taking the time today to do this interview. Well, thanks for helping get the word out about it, and we're going to help get the word about your magazine. Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.